Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Parenting in a Pandemic, feeding your autistic child with fussy eating habits. My name is Ella Carey. I am a nutritionist based in the UK. Today is a very rainy, grey day, so I hope the light is okay today. It's different from last time, so I hope you can see me okay. And before we start, I just want to say thank you for this programme, that we are all grateful to the Abu Dhabi Early Childhood Authority for making this initiative a reality. So, while I get my presentation up, I hope that everybody's having a lovely day today. And this. So last week I presented on anxiety, and that handout is available if anybody would like to request it. And today we're doing fussy eating in autism. So, understanding your autistic child's fussy eating habits and what to do about it. So a little bit about me. I am a nutritionist based in I work in London. I'm a mother of 3 boys. And my middle son had acute anxiety when he was about 7 years old. And this really led me, from a professional perspective, to really focus on gut health, because it made me realize how connected gut health was to a child's well-being, their mental well-being, their behavior, their mood. I saw my son, he was fussy eating, well, everything that I present today to you is from personal experience. And everything that I did in my own personal journey with my son helped him to become a very healthy 11-year-old now. So that's a little bit of backstory about us. And I work with families with children experiencing autism, anxiety, and ADHD. And my son had a very traumatic birth with lots of antibiotics. And that is ultimately what started our journey into gut health. So our key message today: when you have a child who's fussy eating and they can refuse all the foods that you give them, and they will only look for one type of food or a certain food group, namely usually carbohydrates, so crisps, pizzas, or sugary food. This isn't actually naughtiness or stubbornness or will, like we often think that as parents that our children are very willful. It's actually a sign of gut dysbiosis. And it can be turned around through healing the internal health of the gut. The keywords are microbiome, diet and nutrition, and behavior analysis. So we'll have a look into what these mean. And we're going to be looking at tackling fussiness with a 2-pronged approach. The first one will be behavior reward. So in the initial stages of introducing new foods, we do use rewards. And I've provided later on a green and a red list of rewards. And so we don't give these rewards without merit. So this is behavior analysis, and we'll go into more about this later. And then the second prong of our approach is diet and balancing the microbiome, following the gut healing protocol, and why this is important for helping our children naturally widen their food intake and want to look for different kinds of foods. You see, when a child has autism or gut dysbiosis, and all the children I see in my clinic with autism do have gut dysbiosis, and as a parent you can ask a nutritionist or a health practitioner to have a look into this for you further by looking at your child's stool analysis. When a child has gut dysbiosis, their sensory input will be different. Their saliva, the enzymes in their saliva will react with raw foods, for instance, and make their mouth sore. So you might often see red patches on their skin, and that's a reaction. And so it's very important that we work with our child where they are, and we If they are having, for instance, red reactions on their skin from raw food, we don't give them raw food straight away, but we cook all their food. We cook all their vegetables, and then we keep trying, we keep introducing, keep gently introducing these foods until they can happily accept it. So it's not an overnight thing, it's a very, very slow process while our children's gut health improves and their general health improves overall. And as you see their gut health improve and then naturally widen their food choices, what you often see is symptoms of autism reduce as well. So what is gut dysbiosis? In our digestive tract, we have good bacteria and bad bacteria. The microbiome is as individual bacterial signatures, and it's as individual as our fingerprints. So it's all the bacteria and fungi and yeasts on our bodies, in our mouths, on our skin, in our digestive tract, and it can be impacted by our parents' health. Our parents can give us a good bacteria fingerprint or a bad one. It's impacted by birth, so cesarean section or natural. So children born by cesarean section have a lower diversity of microbes and bacteria. And what we want is a really diverse culture of bacteria on our bodies. Feeding in infancy, so bottle fed or breastfed, antibiotics exposure, stress reduces our bacteria. Sterile environment, so if we're always using antibac on our hands, this can reduce our bacteria. Time spent outdoors, the more time we spend outdoors, the better our bacteria rates, good bacteria rates. So you find natural wild bacteria in plants, in parks, on trees, and this is what we really want to be interacting with. And in soil as well. And there's lots of scientific studies to show that time with children spent in soil and gardening really improves their beneficial bacteria and actually can reduce rates of obesity, depression, anxiety, and things like that. So that's really helpful to know. And geography, so depending on where you live, the more built up areas, so the more westernized areas, cities, they have less bacterial diversity. And for instance, the tribes in Amazon have the highest, so more natural environments have a higher rate of beneficial bacteria. So let's just look at a case study. This is a boy that I worked with, and when he's 4 years old, and his symptoms were severely food limiting when I visited him and his family, and I was looking into his food intake. He only was eating bagels, Wotsits, and Rice Krispies, and so absolutely no nutritional content at all. Very, very, very malnourished, actually, even though he had a very swollen belly. Non-verbal and quite strong and aggressive and not sleeping, and his mother was exhausted. And so after 6 months of the gut healing diet, he was eating a wide range of foods. He was verbally communicating with his family. He would climb up onto his mummy and give her a hug and say, "I love you, mummy." His sleeping patterns improved, and then he would start signaling when needing the loo. So this was a really fantastic upward spiral of development and progress. So let's look at a risk of gut dysbiosis. So you might want to get a pen and paper for this. It's a questionnaire, a few questions. Let me move this out the way. Does your child have a history of ear infections or chest infections? If they often did, write 2 points. If they sometimes do, write 1 point. If they never have, write 0 points. Does your child have constipation, diarrhea, bloating, or gas? Often, again, 2 points. Sometimes 1 point, never 0 points. Does your child get angry, weepy, shaky between meals? And this can indicate low blood sugar levels. Often 2, sometimes 1, never 0. Does your child refuse vegetables? Often 2 points, Sometimes 1 point, never 0 points. Does your child limit foods to a carbohydrate or starchy rich foods? For example, pizza, crisps, chips, etc. Sometimes, often, 2. Sometimes 1, never 0. And was your child born via cesarean section? Yes, 2 points. No, 0 points. So if you add your points up, if you have between 5 and 12 points, gut dysbiosis is likely. 2 to 5 points, quite likely, and 0 to 2 points, unlikely. And so that can just be a helpful way to see the different things to identify, or the different things that can impact your digestive system. And actually, this is the point of the message today. It's the digestive system and the health of the digestive system that dictates what kind of foods we actually ask for and that we want. So just to reiterate about the pathogenic flora overgrowth, if you have bad bacteria overgrowth in your gut, in your digestive system, it impacts your mood, your behavior, and your digestive issues, and it impacts food fussiness. So it's the bacteria that's wanting the food more than the child, if that makes sense. So the bacteria will feed off the sugars, feed off the starches, and make the child crave the food. So let's have a look at all of the other symptoms of gut dysbiosis. So food intolerances, especially gluten and dairy. And what you find is that children who are sensitive in gluten and dairy will often crave it. Colic and reflux as babies, so constantly crying. You can't put your baby on their back because they're always crying because they've got air in their back and they always want to be sat up here. That can be a sign of gut dysbiosis. Belching, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, eczema, psoriasis, failure to thrive, so not putting on weight, developmental delay, ADHD or autism, and fussy eating. And this here is just an image of probiotics and antibiotics. So my message today is that we want to really nurture life and the probiotics, and we want to move away from the antibiotic culture that wipes out the beneficial bacteria. So the pathogenic overgrowth causes us to crave sugar, carbohydrate-rich foods, and junk foods. So this is the candida, this is the pathogenic flora, and then the child who's refusing to eat the vegetables because the pathogenic flora is craving that sugary, starchy, sweet foods. And this is just to repeat what we had a look at before, impacting factors affecting the gut microbiome. So we have pharmaceuticals, so like my own son, antibiotics. Where you live in the world, if you live in a more built up area, you're more likely to have gut dysbiosis because of just less nature, less time spent outdoors. Older people have a reduced gut microbiome. Then the birthing process, cesarean section versus natural birth. And bottle fed versus breastfed. So breastfed, a child gets more wild cultures, more wild bacteria given from their mother. And the bottle fed child, unless they're supplemented with probiotics, will have exposure to less bacteria, natural bacteria. And stress and diet impact beneficial bacteria and gut health. And children with gut dysbiosis will crave the foods that they're sensitive to. So thinking about your own child, thinking about what they might be craving or what they will limit their foods to and what they refuse. Does your child crave milk and milk-based products, or high sugar foods, or high carbohydrate foods, so pizza, crisps, bagels, and cereals? In my experience, that's what mostly children crave, and they will refuse vegetables, they will refuse fish, and often they will refuse meat. So, how do we get our children to start eating these good foods? So starting with the textures and flavors that your child will tolerate. Does your child tolerate pureed food? Then we start with soups, or we cook our vegetables and then we puree it. Does your child like crispy things? Then we can bake vegetables. So we're just really having a look at where our child is now, and we want to really gently ease them into trying new foods. So not giving them something completely different to what they like. Often with children with autism or gut dysbiosis or any sensory disorientation, a child will have a favorite type of texture and flavor and temperature. And the sensory input is very important here. And we're just really sensitively tuning into our children and understanding what they like, where they are at that moment. And we're going to, from there, build out and not give them something completely different to what they usually enjoy. And I really like using language, the power of language. So instead of saying, I don't eat that, or my child doesn't eat that, we say, I don't eat that yet. Remind our child, we don't eat it yet. Or my child doesn't eat that yet. That's quite a powerful one. It's because if we're saying, my child doesn't eat that, then we're stopping it and blocking it for the future. But if we say yet, we're leaving that doorway open for them to keep trying. And that's what we want to keep doing. So, tips for successful introduction of new foods. Keep mealtimes relaxed. Stress is counterproductive for progress. So at a table with your family, it can be very stressful thinking my child isn't eating their food. And already when we sit down to eat, we are stressed in ourselves and there's a stressed atmosphere. So I want you just to give it up. I want you to not worry about what your child is eating and trust that, especially using these tips, your child will start eating a range of foods over time. So just keep trying, keep offering, keep introducing foods in a very calm way. If the whole family is eating foods that your child is good for your child's digestive system, and you really emphasize how delicious the food is and just keep offering in a very calm way and just allow your child to be curious. This is a really good way to try and allow your child to start trying new foods in a calm environment. Making sure your child isn't too tired or overly emotional. Calm is a good starting point for new food introduction. Do not worry if your child doesn't accept the food in the first stages. Expect it to be a game of repetition and familiarity. So many children like familiar foods, they like familiar anything. I know my children, when they were little, they like to watch the same film over and over and over again. And it's the same with food. They like to know their world. They like to understand their world and have a familiar world. And so whenever you expect to introduce a new food about 4 times before they might try it, because they want to be familiar with it. So just to repeat, the family eat the same meal, not different for the child. Celebrate when your child tries a new food, positive reinforcement, so hugs, kisses, celebrations, and reward. We'll have a look at the rewards list. When your child tries and accepts a new food, incorporate this new food into the family meals. Expect your child to be eating family meals, so holding this vision in your mind. Instead of thinking that's always creating separate meals for your child, just really imagine and really hold the vision that you're all eating the same meals. And be aware of the power of language. Instead of saying, my child doesn't like this, he doesn't eat it yet. It's a simple one, but powerful. So looking at the rewards, when your child eats a food that you want, so a piece of vegetable, for instance, we can have one of these on the table ready to give them as a reward. And all of these are really fine for gut healing. So you'll notice that they're natural foods, they're fruits, they're attractive to the child, and they're really full of nutrition as well. So our diet nutrition approach to food fussiness. As your child starts to introduce the gut healing foods outlined below and removes the damaging foods, their microbiome will alter as their beneficial flora increases and the levels of candida or pathogenic flora reduces. So as the pathogenic flora reduces, they'll no longer crave the sugar or starchy rich foods, and their sensory input will balance out, making the experience of eating foods more pleasant for them. Below, I've outlined the basic gut healing protocol that has helped thousands of children to eat more balanced, varied diets and to bring happier parents too, because it's very stressful when our children aren't eating how we know that this is serving them and nourishing them. So a gut healing sample meal plan. For breakfast, freshly made carrot juice with kefir. So the carrot juice is full of vitamin A and really good for the liver. And then the kefir is probiotic rich and really introduces a diverse range of bacteria into the gut. Soft boiled eggs, avocado and fresh fish. This is really great for balancing blood sugars, full of essential fatty acids, omega-3, and just a really nice balance of protein and fats and vegetables. And then for lunch, bone broth. Well, don't worry if you've never heard of any of these terms before. At the end of this, I've got links for recipes and everything that you'll need to make these. Well-cooked vegetables, meatballs with liver. And then a snack, chopped up apple with peanut butter if they're not sensitive to or allergic to peanuts. If they are, you can make sunflower seed butter, you can make pumpkin seed butter, you can really get creative there. The point is that we want good fats, so seeds and nuts are really fantastic. Celery or meat or fish pate, roast chicken and vegetables and bone stock gravy with sauerkraut. So you'll notice this is meat heavy. And that's because children with gut dysbiosis and damaged gut lining really need that really good fats to be able to rebuild their gut lining. So if you are vegetarian, you might want to consider changing the diet just therapeutically. So I understand ethically there's a real question mark there, but therapeutically, just for a limited amount of time, while your child is healing their gut, to see it as a real medicinal therapeutic diet. Roast chicken and vegetables and bone stock gravy with sauerkraut for dinner. So we're going to have a look at bone broth as well. So foods to include. Good quality proteins, grass-fed meats, because they're grass-fed over corn-fed, because grass-fed are rich in vitamins A, D, E, and K, which is essential for children's membranes of their gut lining and their brain health. Wild meat, wild fish, and free-range eggs, really good sources of protein. Vegetables, start with textures your child likes, so puree them. If they like pureed, they can have them raw, crunchy, baked, boiled, any way, just as long as they're getting in some vegetables. And if you boil them, add a little bit of the water back into the vegetables if you're pureeing, because that's where the vitamin C is. The vitamin C gets pulled out of the vegetables as you boil them into the water. So don't chuck that water away. Use it for gravies, of soups, or anything, but keep that water. Bone broth is a rich source of minerals for gut healing. Fermented foods, kefir, sauerkraut, yogurt, sour cream, a rich source of probiotics. And if you've not come across fermented food before, I really invite you to have a look into the world of fermented food and how you can incorporate them into your family's daily diet to benefit their gut health and really, really start turning around the family's health directed from their digestive system. So fermented foods is a really cornerstone of this diet. Good fats, so butter, ghee, cold pressed oils, avocados, nuts, seeds, and lard. Fruit, organic, seasonal, and local. And water, so obviously lots of water. And we like to filter out the chlorine, the fluoride, the hormones, and the medication from the water, because these really damage our children's health. So if you want to know or want recommendations for water filters, you can go to my website and have a look. I have a shop on my website and you can have a look there for recommendations. So a real good tip, if your child is limiting their food and you're worried about the nutritional content of their diet, I really recommend making bone broth and just giving them a cup of bone broth with each meal. It's mineral rich. It's rich in essential fatty acids. It's good for the brain and the nervous system. It's collagen rich. It will heal their gut. It will soothe any irritation in their gut. So if a child has an irritated gut, they're not going to want to eat food. They're going to feel full, they're going to feel bloated. And so bone broth is a really good way to get in a really good amount of nutrition into their bodies. And then for extra gut support, add a probiotic capsule or a spoon of kefir if they can tolerate dairy. And if anybody wants to discuss any of this with me via email or online, I'll be available to chat. Just send me an email. Then the foods to avoid for the gut healing process. So the pathogenic flora feed off the sugar and starchy rich foods. So again, as I said before, it's the bacteria that causes us to crave that sugar. So if you see giving your child, oh, he's been really good this week, I'll give him a treat. Actually, it's going to be feeding that pathogenic flora and making the journey of gut health more difficult in the longer process. So it's not a treat. A treat is fruit. A treat is bone broth. A treat is a really nice drink that's not going to impact their digestive system. So fresh juice, for instance. And we want to stay away from sugar, sweets, chocolate, fizzy drinks, crisps and chips, processed meats, fast foods, gluten and milk, because these two often are culprits causing our children to, or when they have an impacted digestive system, they're not going to be digesting gluten and milk properly. And this is going to be fermenting in the digestive system. So at the beginning of this journey, you might need to use these red foods that they're not allowed long term in the short term as a reward. So if your child is like the child at the beginning of our case study who was only eating Wotsits, we're going to use the Wotsits as a reward for drinking some bone broth or drinking some carrot juice or trying some egg or trying some broccoli. So we're really working with our children here. We're working where they are, and we have our vision for the future, and keep holding your vision that they're eating a wide range of foods, they're healthy, and they're accepting all the foods that you give them. But in the immediate moment, it might mean that you need to use the foods that we don't want them to have, just to be able to use it as a reward for the foods that we want to get them to eat. And so the resources and recipes. Bone broth, how to make bone broth. So if you click on any of these, it's a live link and it will take you to websites with recipes. And these gut healing sweets are fantastic because I recommend these as a reward because they taste like sweets, but they're actually good for you. And they're good for the digestive system. So it's a really, we can kind of be clever as parents there. How to make ghee and kefir and sauerkraut. And ghee is a fantastic one for cooking. And to discuss anything in this webinar, you can email me or you can go on my website and have a look at any of the links that I've put up there in my shop. And if anybody has any questions, I'd really, really love to answer questions. And you can type them in the chat box if there's anything about this webinar that you have any questions about. In the meantime, many questions that I get asked by families is, what breakfasts can you feed children who are fussy eating? So children who are fussy eaters, like I said, often crave and will limit their foods to, you know, carbohydrate-rich foods or starchy foods, so cereals. And they'll only eat, you know, Shreddies or Cheerios. And actually, these are sold as children's cereals, but there was a study done on these cereals, and actually they discovered that the boxes had more nutritional content than the cereal itself. And so I really recommend, that's the first thing that we get rid of, is these cereals that are supposed to be children's food. And I actually have a whole month's meal plans of breakfasts for children, because I feel like it's such an important part of the day. Really important to get children set up properly for the day if they're going to school, especially, and to get out of the habit of eating mineral and nutrient deficient cereals. So I recommend, like I said, fish, eggs. You can even have soups for breakfast. You can have things like grain-free pancakes, so buckwheat pancakes. You can have buckwheat waffles. There's loads of lovely gluten-free, dairy-free recipes online. You can Google things like GAPS, which is gut and psychology syndrome, and that's what I'm trained in. Meal plans. And that's where I would start, and that's what a lot of parents ask me, is where shall I start with my child's diet? And I really would start with breakfasts. Even yogurt and fruit is really fantastic. I have a question. Lovely. How can I see this question? I'm trying to open the questions. But I'm not sure how to, oh, is it here? Okay. What about vitamins such as vitamin C and omega-3? Yes, fantastic. Hind, thank you. So vitamin C and omega-3, do you mean supplements, Hind, or food-based? So vitamin C is fantastic, and it's very deficient in our foods at the moment. Years ago, it would have been really high in our fruit and our vegetables. But now the way that the fruit and the vegetables are grown, often it's very limited. So I recommend giving your children as much as you can vitamin C through foods. When you supplement vitamin C, it can actually offset. So your body, if you get a lot of vitamin C, for instance, in a supplement, your body will keep itself balanced and so get rid of a lot of vitamin C. So sometimes you can make yourself more deficient. So giving your children, so as I said before, a tip for keeping vitamin C through food is when you cook, for instance, broccoli is very high in vitamin C, and I love broccoli for that. And I puree it, I bake it, I make broccoli crisps. So many ways that you can give your children broccoli. If you boil it, the vitamin C comes out of the vegetable and into the water. And so what we want to do is keep that water, and you can put it back into the soups, gravies, you can put it back into your child's puree. And that's a really great way for vitamin C. Omega-3 is fantastic for inflammation. It's fantastic for gut health, fantastic for children with autism. Definitely I'd recommend supplementing it, but talking to a professional before supplementing it. But then you can get your food-based omega-3 through foods, fish especially. Thank you, Hind. I hope that answers your question. If you have any more questions, please do type them up here. So Alia, my child has speech difficulty. He would like to keep eating the same meals like spaghetti, egg sandwiches, not the variety on his meals and his development of speech. He's not developing or trying to use new vocabulary. So he doesn't have much variety. He likes spaghetti, eggs and sandwiches. Okay. So what's your question, Alia? If you type your question for me, I'll do my best to answer it as helpfully as I can. But it sounds like your child does have a gut dysbiosis. It could be helpful for you to see a professional and get his stool analysed. You could look at his neurotransmitters as well. There's definitely, I've seen so many children with speech difficulties improve hugely through food. Yes, yeah, absolutely. In my experience, children's vocabulary really improves when their physiology improves and their gut health improves. And if he's eating the same meals, so he's eating the spaghetti, the eggs and the sandwiches. So apart from the eggs, which is great protein, the spaghetti and the sandwiches is carbohydrate rich, starchy rich. That's going to be feeding the pathogenic flora in his gut. And so we want to, be giving him probiotics. We want to be giving him omega-3. We want to be giving him a range of vegetables, but start where he is. So I would go gluten-free for him, for instance, and he could have gluten-free spaghetti. So we're starting where he is. We're not trying to give him a huge range of fish and fruit and vegetables if he only likes carbohydrates at the moment. We're taking it step by step by step. So we're weaning him off the gluten, giving him gluten-free spaghetti, gluten-free sandwiches, eggs, and then keep trying different foods, trying different fish, trying different meat. Try the bone broth. Every mealtime, give him bone broth. I've put the recipe in my webinar. And that bone broth will really, his membranes of his gut will really soak it up. It will start healing the membranes in his gut and in his brain. And as we know, and as we're finding out much more, science is really finding out now that the connection between the gut and the brain is huge. So if our children have symptoms that appear to be brain related, look to the gut, because that's where we start and that's where we can heal anything brain related. On what age is recommended to start taking supplements? That's a really good question. And it's one that I'm really sorry, it's difficult for me to answer because it depends on each individual case. I've had babies on probiotics, for instance. But I would say maybe if your child around 4, but you want to start very small, so really do work with a professional, really work with a practitioner. Thank you for these questions. You're really, really making me very happy to answer these questions because it's a lovely conversation and I'm really understanding your experience and what you need, so I can really tailor my answers to what's relevant for you. And as you've got me here, you might as well use me as much as you can. So for instance, my own son, when he was born, we both had intravenous antibiotics. And then I had, because my immune system was reduced and I was stressed, I had an infection, so mastitis, and then I had more antibiotics. And then my son, he was born naturally and he was breastfed. But because of the antibiotics, it completely wiped out his beneficial flora. And he just would eat. I remember when he was about 3 or 4, I asked him what he wanted to eat and he said a pasta sandwich. And it was then that I really knew that there was something different. So I have 3 sons and he just craved carbohydrates. He craved sweets. And it was very difficult to get him to move to eating a wide range of foods. But through doing this protocol that I've shared with you today, he eats a wide range of foods. We had to go gluten-free and dairy-free for about a year. It's not an overnight solution, but I do really highly recommend it. It's very effective. And for my own son, he had anxiety and he also had skin issues. He had lots of eczema. He had outbursts and eruptions on his skin. And he had very, very, very thin, pale skin as well. And so when he was about 4, we started him on supplements. But it's very different for everybody. And I do recommend that you have help. As a mother myself, I understand it's very isolating and very worrying to have a child with any kind of health issue. Having somebody to ask questions to is so valuable, or having somebody to share with is so valuable. So either find friends that you can share with, talk to your family, tell them what you're doing, talk to your GP, tell them what you're doing, and speak to a nutritionist is really helpful. So functional nutrition, gut health nutrition, GAPS, or you can email me as well. But Alia, yes, I think that I would like to hear back from you, in fact, after you try, 4 to 6 months, as you remember seeing in my case study at the beginning. At the beginning, that the child that was the case study, he wasn't speaking at all. And in fact, most of the children I work with come to me around 4 years old, and they're completely, that's around the age that the parents think we really need to do something, because up until 4, you're kind of waiting to see, is my child going to develop their language? Are they a bit just slow? Are they just, waiting? You give your child the amount of time they need. But when they're looking at starting kind of school age, 4 or 5, and then still not speaking, that's when I start seeing children. And every case we've had, their language has improved, their vocabulary has improved. But when you start improving one thing, you start improving everything. It's never just their vocabulary that improves, their eye contact, their behavior, their connection with their family, their engagement with their world around them, just everything. Do you think there is a link between low vitamin D and speech delay or developmental delay? Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, Hind. Because vitamin D is responsible for the buildup of collagen in the body, and the membranes in the body, so the gut lining and the gut brain, and so the brain lining. And if we have low vitamin D, we're not building our membranes. And so our gut lining is thinner, causing toxicity to pass into our blood easier. The blood is more toxic and it can pass into our brain more easily because our brain barrier is thinner because we have low vitamin D. And you're probably the first person to ask me that, Hind, and that's been something that I really try and hit home to parents often. So the parents that I see with children with autism, speech delay, are parents who have night shifts. They're working indoors, so they don't really get to go outside and have sunshine. Maybe they've moved from a hotter climate to a colder climate. Obviously, I'm in the UK, and they do that. They carry out their pregnancy in the UK when they're used to more sunshine, or they get a job of a night shift and they're inside a lot. And so this is a correlation that I see very, very much. I'm interested in Hind, in what made you ask that question. Thank you. So my next, I see, okay, yeah. So when we start recognizing connections, that's when we can become empowered as parents. And we can empower our friends and our communities, and we can tell people what the important, how to protect themselves and how to protect their families. And it's really important to really make these connections. So fantastic, Hind. And yeah, and the beautiful thing is that the body is designed to heal. So your son, it's not necessary that your son has speech delay, and that's your situation forever. Now you know how to address it. Now you know how to approach it. And we're looking at nutrients, we're looking at minerals, and it's very simple actually. It's just giving the tools, giving the body the right tools to heal. It's like using, we've got a beautiful car and we want to put the right oil in, we want to put the right petrol in to make it run properly. So next week on the 30th, I'm delivering a webinar on bowel issues. So if your child has bowel issues, constipation or diarrhea, or bloating or anything digestive issues, and you want to discuss that or hear about that and how to naturally, so if you want to move away from laxatives and you want natural ways to improve their digestive health, that's what we're going to be discussing next week. It's not glamorous, but it's, as you can see, it's very useful. So if there's no more questions, I'm going to stay online for a few more minutes. It's been such a pleasure to deliver this message to you today. I really hope that you've had some value from it, and that I'd love to know, in fact, before we go, I'd love to know about the questions. If anybody had above 10 in the questionnaire at the beginning, so the point system that we did with the questions. And I'd also like to know what is the most helpful thing that you've taken away today, what you will implement at home. If it's the bone broth, or if you start looking into fermented foods. Okay, lovely. So I'm just going to stay on the line one more minute. Just waiting to see if anybody has any more questions. Please don't be shy. I absolutely love answering questions. And it's really helpful. It's not often that you get a chance to pick the brains of a nutritionist about your child. Please don't feel that you have to deal with anything on your own. Okay. So if there's anything that you'd like to discuss from today's webinar, in the handout, there's my email and my website, and I'd be very happy to answer anything personally if you'd like to discuss your child's personal case. There's one more, I believe. Yes, absolutely. So I'm just going to type in again my email address. But you also have the handout. And it's really, really a fantastic resource to use, you know, people like myself, but also people in your community, other people with children with autism or speech delay, you know, really form that community, really share the recipes, really share the ideas, really share the motivation. It can feel very lonely, but then when you experience any successes and other people are there with you to experience your success with you, that's the biggest motivation. And also hearing other people's success stories is such a huge motivation. I'm just making sure there's no more questions that I've missed. Okay, lovely. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope that you all have a very lovely day, and I will see you next Wednesday. Thank you very much.